Good evening. And welcome to Selene's Gateway. We're live streaming for the first time. And yeah, it feels good. It feels good to get started. And what we'll be doing today is we're going to be talking about Libra season. We're going to be reflecting about the solar eclipse and my personal experience and how you can fine-tune the experiences you've had to associate them with the solar eclipse. And if we end up with some viewers in the chat, then I will be drawing some tarot cards for them. First, let's get us started. It is 9:11 in Portland, Oregon, Pacific Daytime, and it is the day of Jupiter, the evening of the moon, and the hour of Jupiter. The current rising degree on the ascendant is Taurus at 29 degrees and 14 minutes. And you're listening to Selene's Gateway, horoscopes from the moon. But before we get started, I just wanted to begin. I want to begin these things with a feeling and a meaning. And I just want to say hi to Sparkles of Gold. Thank you for joining my first live stream. I appreciate it. But what I'm going to start with is an invocation of gratitude. And I want to start all of my videos with this as a way of setting a tone and a repetition. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm reading a modified version of the words we say before all else, which I was first introduced to in Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass in the chapter titled Allegiance to Gratitude, which I had the pleasure of reading. Me and my partner were doing a lot of reading during the lockdown. It kind of like having that pause gave us the time to just actually sit down and read books for the first time in a really long time. And Braiding Sweetgrass was one of those books that I ended up reading. And I was really moved by the words we say before all else. And so I'm going to read a version of that as I start these. So take a moment and get comfortable as we offer gratitude in this moment. We start with the land beneath our feet. We give gratitude to the land for supporting us all of our lives, for being the foundation that upholds us and the places that we gather under, for being the soil that nurtures all of life. We recognize her, Mother Earth, as Gaia, mother to all, birther and nurturer of all. It is through her gifts that we are blessed with these bodies that contain our spirit. May we learn how to give as she gives, as she demands no price in return. And with the land, we recognize those that were here before us and were displaced by colonizing authorities. We recognize here in Portland the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Calumet, and others who thrived for time immemorial. We would like to see a just world where these lands are returned to their traditional relatives. We give gratitude to the water that nurtures us and gives us strength. We have deep gratitude for its clean properties, and we believe it is our responsibility to help ensure that clean water remains available for all, including our plant and animal relatives of the present and the future. We give gratitude to the plants. They provide us and many more with food and shelter. We thank them for their willingness to offer healing when we are sick, and we are grateful that there are still those that know how to work with plants to make medicine. We give gratitude to all the animals. We are humbled when they give up their lives to be food and clothing for us. We hope to see restoration of relationships with both the plant and animal communities, that we can return to balance and harmony with them. We give gratitude to the air for providing us with breath and lift. We are grateful to the spirit of breath and wind for carrying our words, prayers, and laughter on its back. We give gratitude to the sun for providing us with light and warmth. We have gratitude that the balance of power shared between Gaia and Helios can be felt through the seasons, a reminder that all things need rest as well as growth. May we also give and share our light with such wisdom. We give gratitude to the stars for guiding us. We believe that as we shed and return our bodies to Gaia, our souls return to the heavens, that the heavens contain our ancestors, and that through their light provide us with wisdom, comfort, and guidance. They taught some of us the rhythm of the seasons and how we navigate across both seas and skies. We give gratitude to the 5 wandering stars, the wild sheep of Babylon, and the Grahas of India. We thank them for holding, warming, and teaching us through their spheres of finality, mercy, conflict, love, and ingenuity. And we give gratitude to Selene. She maintains the waxing and waning of the great ocean, as well as the generation and corruption of our lives. She softens the harsh rays as she taught many of us the rhythm of the plant and animal communities. She is the teacher of astrology and astrology, the midwife of all who are born, and may we bring comfort and guidance as she does. And so it is. And so it is. And so it is Libra season. And in Libra season, we find ourselves in Hellenistic astrology, the sun in its fall. And one of the reasons why I love to use the tropical zodiac is because of its connection to the balance of light and its shifting and sharing of night and dark with light and day. And so we had the fall equinox on the 22nd. And what's beautiful about the equinoxes is that they're the borders between Virgo and Libra for the fall, and Pisces and Aries for the spring. And they're the only 2 days out of the whole year where light is equal, where night and day are of equal value and range. And it's that balance that Libra is always trying to tinker with. In the spring, we get the chance for the sun to retake its throne as the daytime overtakes the night, and all of the plant world rejoices as they begin to receive those rays and thrive after the silence of winter. But in the fall, we get to exhale. It's after the summer and after Virgo season and after the fall equinox when we harvest, when, in the Northern Hemisphere, traditionally the food gets harvested. And one of the things that I like to think about with this passing from longer days to longer nights is I like to imagine that this torch is being passed between the moon and the sun. That the sun has had its time, it's had its reign, and it has been praised wildly and widely by all that are under it. But it knows, or the cosmos know, that balance isn't just about an equal side of the scale, two sides being at even, but the balance also requires a step back. That a yielding needs to take place in order for power to be shared evenly and distributed evenly. And that's what I feel the fall equinox is about. It's about the sun bequeathing its time to Luna and handing her the torch as it begins to be her time to reign, as the nights exceedingly take over the length of time and our days grow shorter and our shadows grow longer. But Luna gets to spend more time in the night sky. The other way that we see the balance between Selene and Helios is that Selene or Luna or whatever moon goddess you wish to call her, him by, some traditions, some cultures believe that the moon is the male figure and the sun is the female figure. Just for a point of reference. But Luna is the only sphere that gets to share the daytime sky with the sun. In fact, the moon shares a third of her cycle with the sun in the daytime sky and can be visible, whereas none of the other cosmic beings or stars or constellations or any of those heavenly bodies can be seen. And I believe this, is another way of the cosmos showing us the beauty and gift of them sharing their power, sharing their influence, their reign, and their time. So not only do we see the sharing of light and day and dark and night and the length of time between them, but we can also see it not just in the year, but throughout the month. Because after the new moon, or like a solar eclipse we just had, it's 2 days later that we see the moon rising just after the sun. And this is the type of balance that Libra is looking to achieve. We also see Libra as the scales for money and trade, so that things can be measured for equal value. We can also see them in the story of going into the underworld, of your deeds weighed against the deeds of your heart weighed against a feather. But we also see the scales held by the figure of justice. And I believe that we're in a strong period of time when we need to ask ourselves, what is justice to us? What is your personal justice? What is your personal ethos? What is your idea of right and wrong? I think one of the things that we've seen over the years in the political sphere is that there isn't a cohesive structure of what we think right and wrong is anymore. I think that personal values have been discarded for what the law says. And kind of the idea of quote unquote the law is that it is supposed to be idealistically a set of rules that we all agree on and can feel up like we are all upheld to those standards. And I don't and I know and I know a lot of people would agree with me that that's just not the case anymore. And if you know me, if you follow me on Instagram, if you follow me on Threads, if you follow my Substack, you know that you already know that I'm a political figure, or that I talk about politics a lot. You may even have a understanding of my own personal beliefs, that I definitely lean very far left, and that I, and I'm not going to be afraid to voice those opinions. This isn't going to be a channel or an astrology channel that shies away from talking about politics and current events. And and I'm not saying that to say anything against anybody who has a channel that chooses not to do that, but I just want people to know that that's going to be part of the content here. And it's also important for me to share that I'm probably going to talk about a lot of difficult stuff, because for those that speak the language of astrology, my moon's in Scorpio, and so is Saturn and Mars and Pluto, and the moon got eclipsed like just over 24 hours after I was born. So so I have a lot of intensity in my chart, and I've been through some intense stuff. I'm not going to say I've been through the most intense stuff. Everybody's experiences are different, and our thresholds of pain are based on our level of experience. But it's just definitely going to make me not afraid to share that intensity here. And I'm also a Libra rising, and so I'm always trying to find that balance of like, do I share these intense feelings, experiences, memories, moments, reflections, or like, do I need to read the room and let the peace be, things of that nature. But I'm going to try to not hold back in this space. I do want people to feel safe. I do want people to feel secure. This is a LGBTQ trans friendly space. I support y'all. A lot of y'all are really good friends of mine. and then a lot of my heroes come from your community, like Andrea Gibson, may she rest in peace, also a Scorpio moon. May they rest in peace. My apologies. But I really want people to feel heard, and I also want to, want to be heard, and I want to speak. And I just wanted to relay that out there. Since this is the first episode, the first time I'm streaming, the first time I'm doing this live. I'm not going to talk about Libra season transits today. Instead, I want to offer an opportunity to share a way of looking at the recent solar eclipse and how to reflect upon how it's reverberating in your life at this moment. If you're not aware, the solar eclipse peaked sometime around 2:00 in the afternoon, West Coast time. And on Sunday, the 21st of September. So on that Sunday, where you will first start, if you're trying to see how the eclipse is reverberating through your life, is just think about the things that you did on that day. Anything important, or maybe you didn't do anything important, but maybe you listened to something, a podcast or a documentary or television show, maybe a movie you liked. There was something that you decided to do that day. And so the eclipse has engraved that signature of that day into your astrological essence. And maybe some things led up to it that also reverberated in that way. And if you pay attention to astrology, then you do know already that this was a Virgo solar eclipse in the tropical system, in the tropical zodiac. And it was around 28 degrees of Virgo. And it was the second new moon of Virgo season. And we had a lunar eclipse in Pisces 2 weeks prior. And so there's this igniting of the Virgo Pisces axis. The nodes bring out both elements of both signs in an intense announcement, so to speak. However, there's another layer that looks at the zodiac through a smaller lens, and it's called the Dodecota Moria, or the 12th parts. And the 12th parts help show us a sensitivity. It shows us an enhancement of a sensitivity of a different part of your chart. And that the Dodecota Moria of this solar eclipse was Leo. So this emphasized the Leo placement in your chart, the Leo sign. And especially because this was a solar eclipse, and on K2, the south node of the lunar nodes, and Leo is the sign ruled by the sun, that really creates a stronger signature. Leo's ruled by the sun in traditional astrology, and to have its ruler eclipsed, and then to have this extra level, this Dodecoda Moria signature, like of Leo enhanced, to thus bring that to the forefront even more, is really going to emphasize that part of your chart. And so I'm just going to, if you know your rising and sun sign, I'm just going to speak a little bit about how this is going to come through for you, and give you the opportunity to reflect on it. So because the solar eclipse was in Virgo, we're going to start with Virgo. So for Virgo rising and sun, this is going to emphasize identity, who you are, how you show up in the world. For the rising, it also may include your body. And for the sun sign, it's definitely an eclipse that heavily leaned on introspection and maybe questioning how you feel about the moment that you're in your life. And this doubles down for Virgo rising and Virgo sun, because Leo is the 12th place from either your rising sign or your sun sign. And the 12th house, we find hospitals and sanctuaries and hidden enemies and dreams and nightmares. It's a very subconscious place. Prisons. And it's also the place where we go to study. And my friend Lauren, who goes by the name of Word Witcher on most social media, pointed out to me earlier this year that the internet should rest here in the 12th house. And I agree. And I think a lot of media activity should go in the 12th house, because the 12th house is a place where your body becomes isolated, but your mind can still move and wander. Your body may be held prisoner in a prison. Your body may be unable to move in a hospital, but your mind can still move and go. And you kind of go into that same sort of state whenever you're interacting with a piece of media or going on the internet. Your body becomes a golem or a stone figure of yourself, while your mind engages into the world around you. Through the internet, through a movie, through TV, all of these things. You could even say through a book as well. And I think that's kind of where the imagination and dream space of the 12th house goes. But I really think that this part of the internet and media and the way that we get absorbed into it and lose large chunks of our lives in some cases when you're lost in a doom scroll. It's an interesting space. And for Virgo especially, and I don't think I'm gonna spend this much time on each sign, but I just wanted to bring out this point about the 12th house. Especially for Virgo, this loss of time enhances the possible anxiety that you may feel. Because the sign of Virgo really enjoys having a sense of order and place for things, and being able to adhere to a schedule. And I tend to see Virgo as they just want to experience so much or learn so much or do so much with their time that they that's why they schedule so much. That's why they live the life the way that they do, is because they just want to fit everything in. And it's really beautiful. And so when we lose this time in doom scrolling or in the media, and it can definitely cause some stress for them. And I just wanted to see if the eclipse has maybe helped either emphasize or bring awareness to that point. So yes, so Virgo sun, Virgo rising, the feelings of isolation, spiritual retreat, prison. That's a traditional Hellenistic 12th house thing. Hidden enemies can be brought forward, and then also the imagination in dream space. For Libra rising and Libra sun, this is emphasizing the 11th house. The eclipse itself is happening in the 12th. And so you can take everything that I said about the 12th space and apply that, but I really want you to reflect about your shared spaces with your community, your shared spaces with your friends and your coworkers. How is that part of your life? Did you lose something? Did you gain something? Did you have a revelation about something? Personal example, I'm a Libra rising, and to kind of double down on this axis for us, the Virgo Pisces axis is the 12th and the 6th house. And in the 6th house, we can find things like drudgery, duty, service, chores, health issues. And one of the things this eclipse season did for me is at the hotel I work at, after the lunar eclipse in Pisces, they got rid of the pastry department of the restaurant that I work at, and they turned that space into my new butchery space. And the thing that's funny about it is that I'm completely isolated now. Whereas before I used to work in the back kitchen with other cooks, and so there was like people to talk to and stuff, but now I am isolated and I work alone. People still come to visit. They do care about me, but it's an interesting personal example. But for the solar eclipse, and I'll go into this later, it gave me the opportunity to explore something on that day because I was at work doing my butchery. And it gave me the opportunity to explore something that I would not have chosen to explore had other people been around. So consider that. For Scorpio, rising and sun, this is the 10th space from your rising or sun sign. And this is the place of career, how we want to be seen in the world. It's the metaphor for the 10th house is the high noon sun. And that's where we want to ideally see ourselves. This doesn't necessarily have to be the job that you're doing now, but maybe what you wish you were doing, or just in general, how you want to be held in other people's vision of you. For Sagittarius, sun and rising, this is the 9th space. And in the 9th space, we find where we'd like to travel to, higher education, matters of spirituality. It's a place where we find our teachers, whether they be gurus or history teachers or law professors. The 9th house also has to do with the law and legal matters. So reflect on those subjects when you think about this eclipse. For Capricorn risings, this is the 8th space for Capricorn risings and sun. And here we find matters of taxes and inheritances and possibly death of people that we care about, death of friends or family. But it's also a space where our partners' funds are held. So it may have been an event that has to do with your partner's finances. So just keep that in mind while reflecting about this eclipse. And Aquarius risings, this is your 7th house. This is going to be about the people that you really want to connect with, long-term friendships, relationships, business partners. It's also where we find open enemies. So if you happen to be into athletics, especially one-on-one games or sports, this may have been something that came your way. But the most sensitive point is definitely our deeply held relationships and friendships, the people that we love to sit across the table from and enjoy their company for hours on end. And so reflect on what this eclipse has meant for you there. For Pisces, this is the 6th house. Once again, as I said before, it is a house of drudgery and work and service. If you feel like your job is drudgery, it may be it may be a 6th house place and not a 10th house place. I kind of feel like my job is kind of sitting more in the 6th house the more I try to engage with astrology and tarot as my way of being seen in the world. Also health. I hope you haven't had any health matters come up. This is also where we find our pets. So I hope your pets have been okay. But just keep those in your heart, in your mind, while reflecting on this eclipse. For Aries, this is your 5th house. And you may have found something in the introspective layer that inspires you. It may have given you an idea of creativity, a creative burst. It's also where our children dwell. So if you have children, it may have something to do with them. For Taurus risings and suns, this is the 4th house. And it is the place of family and home and lineage and ancestry and how we want to be seen after we pass, legacy. So maybe matters of that have come into focus for you. For Gemini, this is your 3rd house. And this is about changing your community. This is about insights to the people that you spend time around, but you're not engaged with them directly. This could also have been your siblings. This is also where we find the root of our spiritual practices. I like to think of the 3rd house as, because traditionally the moon finds her joy here, I like to think of the 3rd house as the root of our spiritual practice, whereas the 9th house are the branches reaching up to the heavens. What we do in the 3rd house, how we command our rituals, how we share our experiences with the people around us, that is what bears fruit in the 9th. And for Cancer, this is your 2nd house. Cancer rising, Cancer sun. And so you may have had a focus on finances, maybe a new way of finding finances, a new wellspring of finances, or maybe you lost a resource, or maybe you lost an item. And this is Blue. He's also an astrologer. He comes to all of my astrology classes that I have with Austin Kopic. He's very good at astrology and tarot. And you'll probably see him visit often. And finally, we have Leo. Leo Sun, Leo Rising. This has probably been a very important eclipse for you. Identity and health, the way you structure how you want to be seen and how you want to share yourself with the world. I hope you've had the time to sit and allow the openness of emptiness for insights to come in and come through. I'd like to hear how this has worked for you guys, for y'all. So please send an email to me at esoteric.butcher@gmail.com. esoteric.butcher@gmail.com. And in the heading of the email, if you could just write stories, I'd really like to hear if you have any stories to share, and if you'd be willing to have me read your story on the next live stream, please let me know that in the email, because astrology is inherently built on our ability to observe our lives and relate them to the cosmos. And by sharing our stories, we can continue to build the practice together. And so that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to share my solar eclipse experience. It starts on October 4th of 1997. I was 13. And the nodes were in both Virgo and Pisces. And they were switched, though, with the North Node in Virgo and the South Node in Pisces. And it was on this day that me and my father had arrived in Washington, D.C. for one of the largest evangelical gatherings that had taken place on the Washington Mall. It was, I can't remember the head count. I think it was probably around 1 million men, but it was for a group that my dad was taking me to. I was called Promise Keepers. I was raised born-again Christian. I believe the church was called a Foursquare church, but it was one of those like non-traditionally denominational style Christian churches. And so one of the things that my dad and I were doing around this time of these eclipses is going to these events called Promise Keepers. And there are large gatherings of evangelical Christians who were filling like college football stadiums and stuff like that. And the idea of it was to get men to love their families, or at least that was the idea or the principle behind it. And though October 4th, 1997 wasn't an eclipse date, it's important to know that the nodes were there. The other astrologically relevant thing that was happening at that time is Saturn was in Aries. And so I think maybe you can feel that if you are familiar with astrology and you're familiar with where Saturn is now and that it just recently moved back into Pisces and is going to be in Aries once again, I believe on February 15th of 2026, and will be there for the next couple of years, you can I bet you can see where I'm going with this. Because what I did on the solar eclipse this year was I was isolated in my Virgo 12th house, Pisces 6th house, new butchery room on a Sunday afternoon, cutting steaks for the week. And I decided to turn on Charlie Kirk's memorial. If you're not familiar, Charlie Kirk was an evangelical activist who had spent a majority of his adult life, I think his whole adult life, like after the age of 18 or something like that, going to college campuses and trying to convert young adults, very young adults, fresh from the home, experiencing life on their own for the first time in their life, young adults, and trying to convert them to Christianity, to evangelical Christianity. And after the lunar eclipse, or around the lunar eclipse, Charlie Kirk was speaking at a college campus doing his normal stuff and was shot and killed. And I had no idea who Charlie Kirk was. And I'm not claiming that I know who he was now, but I've been able to gain a little bit of understanding of his life and, what he did. And just to preface the rest of what I'm doing here is I'm not going to speak in favor of Charlie Kirk in this. I'm just going to be expressing a dialogue about the situation. So I have a wound with Christianity. For those that are well versed in astrology, I have Chiron in the 9th house, and so my wound is around spirituality, the law, and higher education. So I never went to college. I had a falling out with Christianity when I was a teenager, and I'm never going to go back. And it took me a long time to come back to these occult roots where I could start practicing and expressing myself in a spiritual manner once again. But back to Charlie Kirk. So after Charlie Kirk died, my Instagram or social media feeds just started getting filled with all of these things people were sharing about. There were basically snippet clips of absolutely awful, terrible, racist and homophobic and sexist stuff that he had said on people's podcasts and just social media posts and just all this other stuff. And so I was like, man, this, is really taken aback. Why, what is all of this contention about? Why am I seeing all of this? And, I think about it a little further and, my social media feeds are leftist leaning. So it was a bunch of leftist propaganda. Anything that's that heavily one-sided is is always going to fall into propaganda in my book, regardless of whose side it's from. And even if it is the truth, like it's still like presenting a very strong bias of ideology. And it's important to see that as well. I'm just not going to say that it's not propaganda. So I'm being flooded with all these images and words that Charlie Kirk had said throughout the years. And then I noticed I still maintain contact with friends and family members who are religious and right wing and conservative of various shapes and levels. I try to maintain contact with them for multiple reasons, but one of them is so that I can kind of like ask gentle questions uh, as a way to get honest responses without flaring things into arguments, because I want to gain understanding about what's going on in their political and social sphere. And I know that there's a tendency to cut those people out of our lives, and it's totally understandable that people make that choice. And I'm not here to say that that's the wrong choice at all. If you can stomach to leave a couple of them in your life just for moments like this so that you can get an idea of what's going on in other people's spheres, I highly recommend it. But my dad's still hardcore conservative, and I have some friends that are. And so I reached out to one of my friends, and they know that I'm never trying to, spark tension with them. So they feel comfortable being honest with me about stuff. And so they told me, so I was like, who's Charlie Kirk? Like, I'm just legitimately asking, like, who is this person? They told me about him and about his work and how they felt about it and like how it was really inspiring for them. And that they felt that it was tragic that like people were celebrating his death. And so, yeah, so I was curious. And then I saw that Donald Trump was speaking at his memorial. And so that made me even more curious. And so there I was on the butcher block, listening to Charlie Kirk's memorial. And I don't recommend people putting themselves through this type of stuff because it can be really hard to just like analytically listen to some things. But it was interesting. And when I noticed it, before I even did the research, I noticed that his work and the stuff that they were talking about really reminded me of Promise Keepers. And Promise Keepers presented itself as like this like reuniting Christian values and family values and getting men to like care about their wives and stuff like that. But there was always also this part of it that was like, but women need to like go back to the traditional role. And obviously we don't like, the homosexual community, the LGBTQA plus community, there's always that tone as well. Like, just like, because it's more about like them talking about Christian values of how the family should be, like, and like reinforcing that is how they exclude, the rest of our friends and families. And so, yeah, so when I did the research and saw that the axis of the nodes was in the same spot, it really made me think of well, first of all, how the nodes, unite, but also like corrupt whatever axis it's in. Like, you're getting this Jupiterian Piscean message of like of spirituality and coming together, and these like high ideals, but there's this like also this corruption of materiality and like all this money being made from it. And that is definitely the same boat that like Charlie Kirk's organization Turning Point. It, like it's the same sort of thing, except for instead of targeting fathers and sons, like they're going to college campuses and you know, they're kind of following the same sort of like um, steps that the Promise Keepers did, because one of the things that the Promise Keepers movement also did was they uh, enlivened the evangelical base to show up to vote during the 2000 election. And the reason why Donald Trump spoke at Charlie Kirk's, like why the Trump administration spoke at Charlie Kirk's memorial, is because of Charlie Kirk activating and like getting all of these evangelical college kids to turn out to vote for Trump in 2024. And it's just, I just wanted to offer the opportunity to, you know, share that uh, that astrological piece of knowledge that I found, that there's this re-energizing of the evangelical Christians as a way of, you know, supporting Trump's campaign. And like I've been following, I follow politics constantly, me and my partner both, and so like it's not a surprise that like the evangelical base is being like energized to vote for Trump, but I wanted to show this resonance of exactly like how this played out in the late 90s as well. And the other thing that of how this like solar eclipse is resonating is like my partner Katie, you know, she pointed out Stephen Miller's chart to me uh, before the lunar eclipse, and we were looking at it and we are like, oh wow, you know, this is crazy. And we ended up you know, utilizing it. I don't think I'm going to bring up the chart points of his, well no, let me pull up his chart really quick. But uh but it was interesting because it was this activation and this understanding of seeing this resonate. And so she brought up Stephen Miller's chart, and then we ended up using it uh, for our weekly astrology meetup. We have an in-person local Portland gathering at the Rose City Book Pub, where we get together and discuss astrology every week. And one of the things that we do is we do a weekly mystery chart. And so we decided to offer Stephen Williams or Stephen Miller's chart as the mystery chart. And it was funny because like so many times the mystery chart is somebody that like we can appreciate, or like an artist or an actor or something like that. And this was a person who's like writing the immigration law that we're seeing being enacted right now in the United States. And this is a person that's, you know, writing like Trump's inauguration speeches and stuff like that. And so I wouldn't consider him to be somebody I'd want to like admire. So we'll put him in the villain category. And so, yeah, so one of the things that's interesting about Stephen Miller's chart is that he has Pluto on the MC in his chart. And he's also has a Mars Mercury conjunction in Leo. And so when we're thinking about this eclipse season, like his, you know, his ninth house, where he is, you know, utilizing his college education and, you know, his idea of spiritual wisdom, as corrupt as it may be, and also it's activating his Leo house, which he's a Capricorn rising, 14 degrees, which is also interesting for other reasons. And so Leo's in his 8th house, and so it's activating the eclipse activated this like Mars Mercury conjunction. And so, and the new moon, the first new moon of Virgo, was conjunct his sun. And his sun is at 0 degrees and 46 minutes of Virgo. And so now every time he has a birthday, it's conjunct Regulus as well. So he's just been getting this supercharged Regulus energy ever since Regulus moved into Virgo. I believe it was in 2012 or 2014, maybe earlier. I'm skipping on that. Anyway, so these eclipses have been activating his sun, the sign that his sun is in. And so what ends up happening is I'm sitting there listening to the memorial, and Stephen Miller gets up to speak as the eclipse is perfecting. And you can read about it online. He gives the most fire and brimstone speech out of anybody else that got up there. And as the eclipse is perfecting, he says, they have no idea the dragon that they have awoken. And I am just blown away by the literal expression of that, of those words. The eclipse points are seen as dragons, both in the medieval Latin tradition, as well as in the Indic tradition. And yeah, and Charlie Kirk, he has his Venus at 28 degrees of Virgo. And what we ended up seeing later on in the memorial was his wife taking over. So he had Charlie Kirk had Venus in the 10th house in Virgo at 28 degrees. And so his Venus, his wife, his relationship is stepping into the role that he was holding. And I just thought that those were really interesting reverberations. And then it even carried further, because what ended up happening when we had our equinox dinner, me and my partner Katie, my love Katie, we basically host a Thanksgiving-esque style meal every 6 weeks based on the pagan wheel of celebration. So the 2 equinoxes and the solstices, and then the fire festivals in between, including Samhain, Beltane, Mabon, and the one in the winter is skipping my mind right now, Imbolc. And so we had our fall equinox party on Wednesday, or just yesterday. And what ended up happening is I wasn't even trying to turn the conversation this way, but the conversation ended up turning into a roundtable discussion about our own personal, like, Christian wounds. Like, what were our wounds from experiencing Christianity, either firsthand or secondhand? And I really think that the nodes are a part of this. I think that the Jupiterian Pisces allows us to have the expanding experience of consciousness that allows us to be spiritual beings, especially through the felt lived reality. But then the scrutiny also of Virgo wanting to bring it to task, and not just like not just to be skeptical of spirituality, but to hold people to the standards that that they say they believe in. And I think it's that, and I think that the the eclipse points, the nodes, the shadows, I think that they really emphasize that part of that relationship, because one of the things that seemed to reverberate in the conversation that we were having was that there was a sense of that the controversy usually was around people being two-faced or not, you know, there's a word for it that's slipping my mind right now, but just not holding themselves to their own standards. And I think that's one of the things that is the scariest part about evangelical Christianity today is that there is a monstrous body of capitalists, of capitalism, that hides behind the guise of Christianity and has for a long time. This isn't like revelatory, like breaking news stuff for people who've experienced it, for people who've been paying attention. But it's just being invigorated right now. And these eclipses are going to continue to invigorate it for the next year at least. And I think that it's something that we should pay attention to. And so here I am again, still pointing this out, still kind of like reverberating this essence of what the solar eclipse meant in my time, in my week. And I hope that it's been helpful to hear a reflection like that, so that you can kind of like look to how the waves of experience, like how they link together through multiple different like angles and facets. And once again, I'm a Libra rising, and so I'm thinking about, Leo 11th house things of groups of people, how groups of people connect to each other, and how those experiences, shaped my life. One of the hypocritical was the word I was looking for. One of the hypocritical ways that the Christian church showed up in my life is that when I was younger, when I was a teen, when I was around this 13-year-old teenage year, the church was really pressuring me, because I was also a goth kid, because I was really depressed because I was going through a lot of hard stuff. But the church was really pressuring me to like step away from my friends, from my quote unquote secular friends, from my non-church world friends. But they weren't catching me. They weren't giving me sanctuary. The parents of the other kids in the church weren't reaching out to me, inviting me to birthday parties, inviting me to stuff that they would do. Like the kids themselves were ostracizing me while I was at school. And so I was living in these two worlds where, the church, the Christian church was trying to tell me to like love your neighbor, be loving, be like Jesus, do all this loving stuff, be loved by the church, blah, blah, blah. And like, you can't hang out with those people. But then when I was with my friends who were also like going through really hard times in their lives, like they were there for me. They held me, they respected me, they listened to me. They answered their door in the middle of the night when I was, jumping out of my bedroom window and like running away from home and needed somewhere else to sleep, just all these other kinds of things. And like, sleep, like they'd find me sleeping in their car, in the morning, stuff like that. They were there for me. They were there to hold me and take care of me and listen to me and support me. And so the the words of the Christian world wasn't being upheld by the actions, by the foundation, by the life. And I saw and it didn't take long for me to like leave the church after that. And of course my dad always tried to pull me back in. But the other thing that was happening to me in that period of time is or happening in my experience was that my stepmother Kay, who was married to my dad, uh, had Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS. And if you're not familiar with what ALS is, but if you lived through the Ice Bucket Challenge era, you probably know what ALS is. But ALS is a disease that affects the nervous system. And what it does is it slowly goes and detaches the nerve from the muscle. And then the muscle dies. But it doesn't affect the brain. And so the disease just slowly moves through your body and it takes away all of your functions, all of your ability to move and talk and eat. But your mind remains whole. So your body just becomes a prison to your mind. And my dad and my stepmom, we would go to church all the time and we'd lay hands on her and pray and ask for a miracle to like heal her and stuff. And when she finally passed, through that time, I should say that the church was, stepping in where they could help. They were doing meals so that my dad didn't have to cook all the time. And they were helping out. They were coming in and like spending time with Kay and like all these other things. But when she died, they vanished. And there was no one there to pick up my dad in his grief. And so I guess the way that I kind of want to end this story is, be there for each other when you can. There's this thing that happens with grief where when somebody passes, the funeral happens, and then there's this thing that I've been called the drop off. And the drop off is where like somebody dies, you're getting all these reach out, all these texts, you're getting overwhelmed with all of these like people saying that they're sorry and their condolences and they want to, be there for you. And then after the funeral happens in the Western culture, that they disappear. And so if you have somebody in your life who's going through something like this, and you have the space to be able to do it, I offer and suggest a practice of building community by putting a reminder in your phone to check on them every 2 weeks, or every new moon or every full moon. I like to tie things to the moon here at Celanese Gateway. Every quarter moon, it depends on how close this person you are to them, or maybe it doesn't even matter how close you are. Sometimes I'll even set a 6-month reminder just to like check back in, because grief doesn't end overnight. It takes much more time to release grief than it does to host a funeral. And I've been taking a class from Freedom Cole, whose website is Science of Light. And one of the things that he said at the beginning of this class is that the Vedic belief is that when somebody passes, there's a year of them still kind of like being with us on this plane. And so if you're experiencing grief, or if you have somebody close to you that's experiencing grief, just know that they definitely still need to be checked on, even if it's been 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, because that spirit's still lingering and that light is still diffusing back into the heavens, and the memories are still reverberating into the people that loved them. And I know that this is a heavy topic and a heavy episode. And I was hoping that I would have some people here in the chat to pull tarot cards for, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen tonight. And that makes sense because this is the first live stream ever of Selene's Gateway. So instead, I'm just going to pull a tarot card for you, dear listener or late watcher. We're going to use the Light Seers Tarot. I've been really enjoying using this deck because I experience a lot of heaviness, and you may recognize that if you've listened to this whole episode. And so one of the practices with this deck is that you pull a card every day, and that's a normal tarot practice. Most tarot practitioners do that anyway, but it's I read reversals. Not everybody reads reversals, but this is a purposeful, always upright. And the Light Seers Tarot does a really good job of bringing a positive message forward. And so that's been really helpful for me because of my heaviness. And so I'm going to draw a card, a light side card, as they call it in the deck. Or, yeah, I think that's what they call it. And we'll see what the message is. And we're going to call this a card for Libra season. And we'll see what it is. I always cut and shuffle 3 times at the minimum. And I'm a bridge shuffler. I shuffle like playing cards. I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but that's how I do it. Always have. But as I make this final shuffle, I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. And hopefully we'll make this a regular thing. I hope that you've enjoyed our time together. I hope that you've enjoyed experiencing me talk off the cuff, because if you've listened to my podcast or read my work, it's kind of a different experience because I'm really more methodical when I'm writing. And so the card is Justice. If you're not familiar with the traditional astrological associations with the card Justice, the card Justice is associated with Libra. And Justice is here to remind us that justice is ours to hold and decide. That justice is just us, in the words of my good friend Avatieri. And in this deck, each card comes with a mantra. And so I'm going to go ahead and read that mantra to you now. But I want you to hold in this, in this message, that we may have our own sense of justice, and we should really reflect on what we think is just. But we need to also find a way to reorganize our collective experience of justice and to hold people accountable to that experience. I don't think it's just that we have homeless people in our country. I don't think it's just that we have CEOs that think that water isn't a right. I think that when we reflect on the natural world and how it gives to us openly and freely all of its gifts of food and water and air and warmth, that these things are a gift from the cosmos and shouldn't be withheld from us. And so the mantra from the Justice card from the Light Seers Tarot is, my good karma is delightfully loving, and it can be the most motivating of teachers. And with that, I say, may the fire inside guide you. Thank you for listening. And I wanted to end there, but you should find me at sellingisgateway.com. You should like and subscribe to this channel and like this video and hit the notification bell and all of those other wonderful things that you're supposed to say on YouTube videos. And my name is Reverend Devin Malone. You can call me Rev Dev. I am a licensed reverend through the Universal Church. You can find it online. I did that so that I could marry my friends, and that was an amazing experience. And I hope to do more weddings through this astrological lens of sharing and binding, and also some funerals too. And so, yeah, I hope to be able to offer those services. But you can find me also on Substack as esoteric.butcher, and Instagram and Threads, the Esoteric Butcher. And you can find my astrological and tarot services on sellingisgateway.com. May the fire inside guide you. Have a good night.